I'm Dan, and this is Dan Explains. After a long winter's nap, with the return of spring warmth, many organisms start waking up and venturing out. One of the first things I see on those warm spring afternoons is honeybees. Most are coming out to stretch their wings for the very first time. It reminds me that for the last couple of years, I've made an annual habit of doing a video about honeybees. So today, I have another one for you. I'm going to talk about the development and life cycle of honeybees. There's a lot more to the humble honeybee than most people realize. Let me explain why. People know bees use comb to store honey, and comb known as honeycomb. But they also use comb to grow baby bees in comb, known as broodcomb. As gross as it might sound, broodcomb often gets repurposed by the bees as honeycomb. Whether that honey ends up in your honey jar, only your beekeeper will know. Unless you buy cut comb, that is, which is when you buy honey still stored in the comb. Beekeepers don't sell cut comb from repurposed broodcomb for a reason. It all comes down to what happens to the cells that are used to develop bees. But I'll get to that in a minute. Let's rewind a bit. Almost any cell can be used for honeycomb, but the cells have to have the correct size and shape to be used for brood. It's usually the cell itself that helps determine what kind of bee the egg that's laid in it by the queen will become. If the cells are shallow and small, the queen will lay fertilized eggs in them, intended to be worker bees. If the cells are large, which the queen figures out by measuring with her front legs, she will lay unfertilized eggs for boy bees, also known as drone bees. There is a third type of cell called queen cells, which are distinguished because they point downward rather than being arranged horizontally. Lastly, there are oddly shaped cells that are either not deep enough or too deep. These cells are generally only used for honey by the bees. Once the egg is laid by the queen, regardless of what kind of cell it's laid in, it remains an egg for about 3 days. Things diverge once the egg hatches and becomes a larva. But all bee larvae are fed something called royal jelly by nurse bees. Although larvae destined to be queens are fed larger amounts of royal jelly than the other types of bees, which stimulates them to become queens. Interestingly, if you've ever bought royal jelly, although queen cells aren't used to store honey, the royal jelly is collected from specially made queen cell frames that only have queen cells, using a tiny spoon. Because queen larvae are fed much more royal jelly, it's more efficient to collect it in that way. At the end of the larva stage, the worker bees cap the cell over, and the bee larvae wrap themselves in a cocoon similar to what caterpillars do, at which point the developing bees enter the pupa stage. When the pupa phase of the development starts depends on what kind of bee the larva will become. In spite of the fact that queens are larger, because they are fed much more food, they develop the fastest. So their cells get capped over at around 7 days, and they pupate at about 8 days. Worker bees do this around 9 days, and drones take the longest at about 10 days. How long they stay in the pupa stage is again dependent on what type of bee they will be. Since queens will often have to fight each other to the death, they have a strong evolutionary pressure to develop fast and emerge quickly. Because if they emerge first, they can kill the other developing queens by stinging them through the cell wall of the comb before they even emerge. However, worker bees can take a liking to certain queens still in their cells, and may protect them from marauding already emerged queens. Queen bees emerge at about 16 days, worker bees at about 21 days, and drones take the longest at 24 days. On a side note, once the adult bee emerges, it leaves the cocoon behind in the cell. This cocoon layer gets thicker and thicker with every adult bee that emerges from that cell. This is why, unlike honeycomb, broodcomb is not edible. Once they emerge, the life of different types of bees are drastically different. Queen bees try to fly out of the hive and mate with drone bees. Once mated, they return to the hive and try to kill any remaining rival queens. If they succeed at that, they will become the hive's queen, and could live up to 5 years running around the hive laying eggs. If you want to know what happens to the hive's old queen, watch the video I did last year on bees. Anyway, the life cycle of the worker bee varies. But they all have certain roles that are age dependent. Newly hatched bees are nurse bees that feed and take care of larvae. Once they grow older, they become foragers that collect pollen and nectar. And in old age, the foragers primarily collect water, which the bees need to drink and regulate the temperature of the hive. Worker bees don't usually live past 45 days or so, although in places with long winters, since the bees are not wearing themselves out foraging, worker bees can live several months inside the hive off stored honey, and without ever coming out. The bees with the simplest lives are the drones. Once they reach maturity, they leave the hive in search of queens to mate with. If they find one and successfully mate, it's over. They die. If they don't, they eventually die anyway. If for some reason they are still around when fall comes, since they're moochers that don't do work, and the queens don't go on mating flights during winter in most places, they are expelled by the worker bees to die out in the cold. No male bees are allowed to stay in the hive for winter. The queen will lay eggs in drone cells to make more drones in the spring. So, that's the abbreviated life cycle of the honeybee. Thank you for watching. If you like this video and other topics ranging from theology to science, please press the like button. Subscribe to my channel and ding the bell to get notified when I post new videos. Also, please support me on Patreon to get extra content and special perks. Link in the description. The more people support me, the more time I can dedicate to making videos like this one. So, until next time, have a great week.